How should Nebraska handle its other true freshman quarterback in 2024? That's next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's a $150 bonus bet with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
All right, welcome. Happy Tuesday, and we are kind of continuing to go back through, and I don't know, it's like we're doing a series, Mitch, of kind of state of the program type of thing right now, and so we thought we'd put a bigger magnifying glass today on the quarterback room, and it's not just about Dylan Raiola, but it's also about Dylan Raiola's effect on other people. If you remember, they brought in another quarterback in the 2024 class. And
remember him.
Yeah, people from around here should remember him, Daniel Kalin. And then there's another quarterback who started several games last year, and there's plenty more that Nebraska has their eyes on down the line, including they're trending pretty well right now for a 2025 quarterback and one of their top guys on the board. So, with that being said, we'll start with Kaelin. Mitch, how do you think they handle him this year? Specifically, I guess we start with this year with the Raiola situation and the entire quarterback room in general. Like, how does the Daniel Kalin piece get figured out?
Yeah, really the question I have there is, should Nebraska try to redshirt Danny Kalin? And by the way, are we going to call him Danny or Daniel?
I've vacillated between Daniel and Danny I think I'm like probably 75% Daniel. But I've definitely heard most people go with Danny nowadays too. Danny's a great quarterback name.
I think it is. I think he wants to be called Danny. I would expect. I'm like the election analyst here. I'm forecasting a change of name on the roster, on the official Nebraska roster. I think it may actually go to Danny at some point. Maybe not. Maybe he wants the formality of Daniel to be listed on the roster, but he goes by Danny. I've always known him as Danny.
Is he Dan in like 4 years?
Once you get past the age of 20, is it appropriate to go by Danny anymore? I mean, some like Danny White.
Right.
I'm going to call him Danny. So should he redshirt? Should Nebraska redshirt him? That's a deep, complex question that I think has many directions that you can go in answering it. And if you subscribe to the normal progression of quarterback development, and you have a 5-star true freshman who's ready to go, and then an incumbent starter behind him who's the primary backup, it would make sense to say, at least let's go into the season and attempt to get him 4 games with this 4-game rule, and let him redshirt and preserve a year of eligibility. But I don't think it's that simple, Connor. I think it's a question about what the trajectory is going to be as you bring quarterbacks through the Nebraska program. Is there a vision that Nebraska will be now with Dylan Raiola at the top of the list, this quarterback factory where you just play guys when they get in because QBs transfer if they don't have opportunities, and you're just looking to get guys through your program and develop them as fast as possible? I'm not sure which track Nebraska will want to place Danny Kalin on.
Yeah, I mean, don't you have to look at it more through the lens of, what's the best opportunity to keep him here? And that's not just for Kalin. That's for kind of everybody. What's the best? What gives us the best opportunity to keep him here? Is it getting him on the field early and giving him a little bit of a taste of that? And if you did that, like you said, Mitch, he would still probably end up keeping a red shirt unless unless something horrible goes on with Dylan Raiola.
that's the thing. I mean, even if you push it and say we're going to play him at every opportunity, if he's the number 3 quarterback and you stay primarily healthy ahead of him, will he even have the chance to play in more than 4 games? I mean, Nebraska isn't Ohio State and probably isn't going to be in a bunch of snooze fests in the fourth quarter where you just typically get your third team QB reps.
Yeah, no, and then, then you're projecting injuries and stuff like that. This is, I guess, part of it. They always talk about how the coaching staff, that is, always talks about how, hey, you saw what happened last year. We needed 3 quarterbacks to get through the year. And I appreciate the sentiment, and I appreciate being prepared for that piece of it, and wanting to have as many guys ready to play as you could possibly get. And I think it sends a message to those guys that they do need to be ready, which is only a positive thing for your team. But in reality, you don't. I mean, it's especially considering that Nebraska is moving, their quarterback in particular, they're moving to an offense where they're not going to run the quarterback all the time. Not that the quarterback still can't get hurt, but it's going to be less likely. And, Raiola is a different kind of quarterback, where I think he is just going to do a much better job, and he will be asked to protect himself more. So, like, the likelihood that Nebraska will actually need multiple quarterbacks to get through a season in which Dylan Raiola is their starter has significantly decreased from the years past. Not saying it's not possible, and I'm not trying to tempt fate, that's for sure. But like, it's just a lot less likely. So I don't know that you approach it from the standpoint of, we're going to need you to for sure be ready to play this year, because that's the way our seasons have gone.
Okay, so here's another intriguing piece of this, and it involves Heinrich Haarberg specifically, because he's an athlete who, if he doesn't rank among the top 11 on your offense, I mean, just like overall football skill, is he in your top 11? Maybe. Is he in your top 15 offensively? I think yes. He can help your team. And if he's just your straight number 2 quarterback, are you really maximizing what you should be getting out of him? Let's say heading into August 31st, Dylan Raiola wins the job. Heinrich Haarberg is the clear number 2. Do you just let Heinrich, wear a headset and be the number 2, one play away, one snap away, you're always ready to go? Or do you say, okay, we're going to incorporate you in other ways into this offense because you're a weapon and we can find ways to get you the ball a few times a game? And if that's the case, then I think you have to treat your number 3 a bit different, because the number 2 isn't going to get the same amount of training necessarily during the week. He's going to go and, let's say, he works with the tight ends or the H-backs or the wide receivers for a week. So I think in that situation, Danny Kalin needs to be more ready. And maybe if there is a situation in the fourth quarter, instead of putting Haarberg in, even though he's clearly the starter, if like Dylan sprains an ankle, maybe you want to get Kaelin the reps in the fourth quarter of that game, because you need him in this system.
I'm in lockstep with you on Haarberg. I think I think he's too good of an explosive, I guess, of an offensive weapon to just have him sitting there, like you said, with a headset on. So I think you basically approach him like he's a gadget type of player. He can come in at various points during drives to throw curveballs, get that little option game that they had at various portions of last year, and get that thing going a little bit. And then approach Danny like he's your, kind of your backup a little bit. And then when you look at it, you get really thin, because then theoretically, in that case, all 3 of them kind of have jobs, right? They all have something to do really with no backup behind them, I guess, with the exception of Raiola. So it hinges on, let's recap. Health, obviously, first of all. And then I think it's probably, how do you want to shape the room after that with Haarberg? What do you want to make out of him? Kalin, what do you want to make out of him? And then you kind of you're just in a thin spot, and then you get the opinion of a Kalin who's like, okay, how do you want to approach this from this standpoint? Here's this idea that we have for you. where do we go from here? That feels like it comes later down the line, or third or fourth in the line of things they would have to prioritize just because of how thin they are from a scholarship perspective at the moment. But as we'll talk about when we come back in the next segment, there's more to this, and that it doesn't end with the guys who are currently on the roster. So we're talking about 2025, and then all of a sudden kind of stacked up 2026. So there's that case as well. Let's continue on this segment here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast in the second segment. But first, a reminder to please subscribe and follow on Twitter at LockedOnNEB, or of course your email. We want to get to an email a mailbag segment at some point. LockedOnNEB@gmail.com. Send us your emails there. We'll be back after this. All right, it's playoff time. The NBA playoffs are going strong. There's bad officials all over the place. The last 2-minute reports are full in the NBA. And then, of course, there's the NHL as well, where there's upsets galore, and baseball's in full swing. I used the FanDuel Sportsbook over the weekend to bet Bobby Witt Jr. to get 2 hits in the game that I went to on Sunday. And guess what he did? Ooh. He got 2 hits. It was amazing. It was a great way to watch sports. And I did that with the FanDuel Sportsbook. And right now you could be like me. New customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. You bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Head to FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet an automatic win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
So speaking of Bobby Witt Jr., Connor, I was in the basement, stuck in the basement at home where I am right now. Last night, as a tornado warning rolled through my part of the Omaha Metro, and had the weather on one TV and had the Royals on the other TV, and this is not an ad for anything, and saw Bobby Witt Jr. factor in a nice three-run seventh inning for the Royals, just to ho hum, comeback win against the Brewers, and there's another victory. Bullpen did its job. Fun to watch these guys.
The Royals kept us sane during a severe storm. How about that? The life has really turned around in the last year or two, Mitch. It's pretty good stuff.
Everything good at the Happer household through the severe weather?
Yeah, outside of our little snafu with the old sump pump basement situation on Sunday, we've recovered. We've picked up cleanly, which is good, and now we work on a long-term solution.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Everything's good here. So let's continue this QB conversation. And we talked before the break about Danny Kalin, and I think we kind of came to the compromise here that the best situation is for Nebraska to go into the season expecting him to play as much as he's needed, and maybe as kind of like a pseudo 2-3. He's your emergency quarterback, not necessarily your starter if there's something extended that happens to Dylan Raiola, but probably the guy who's getting the maybe the second most reps in practice, because you want to be able to feature Heinrich Haarberg in another role. So a supplementary role, still a quarterback, but somebody who can help your offense because of his talent. I also want to ask in this Kaelin discussion, how much it matters as we look at it, what the Huskers think about Danny long-term, what he can be in the Nebraska program later in his career, and then even look to the future a little bit. So we're very early in his development. But what do you think Nebraska envisions for Danny Kalin, considering that he came in at the same time as Dylan Raiola?
Yeah, it's funny because his, I guess the buzz around him, or the circumstances around him, certainly the framing, I guess, of Daniel Kalin looks a lot different than what it did if it would have gone how we thought it was going to go for the entirety of basically the 2024 cycle last summer and into the fall. When he was remember it was right around this time, and we were talking about peer recruiting and him kind of getting everybody on board and being that person in the class. And he played that role well all the way down to the finish. And I think that's a big part of, quote unquote, his game. He has the ability to he's got a good personality, and people kind of flock to him a little bit. That's definitely one of the appeals to Kaelin's, like what he brings to the table. I don't know. I saw him a bunch in high school, and I wasn't, completely blown away, with anything that he was giving you. Obviously, he's done from all reports that we've heard, he did a great job in spring ball this year. So, him being around talented people, and I think the development in that quarterback room is pretty stark from day one when the staff got here to now. And I think they can really develop guys in that room. But I don't know, what is the trajectory for a guy like that who comes in as a pretty heralded recruit nationally? He's thought of pretty well. But at the end of the day, he was kind of Nebraska's. He was obviously Nebraska's second option in the room, and they still ended up getting him. So it's circumstances, the framing, plus obviously the talent level too.
Yeah, a year ago at this time, Dylan was on the verge of committing to Georgia, and Danny was committed to Missouri. And then throughout the month of May, those things materialized, and very quickly, Kalin flipped from Mizzou to Nebraska, and then became the lead recruiter through Nebraska's push, which produced double-digit commits in June and early July. So they relied on him a lot, and I think they still believe in him. They believe more in him now because of what they've seen in his first semester on campus.
Definitely.
But I think in today's college football, with just as transient as the QB position is, you just have to treat everyone like they're potentially your future starter, and you have to push them through the program. Meaning, don't worry about red shirts, and you have to get them ready to play, and just expect the unexpected. That you're either going to need a full room because of injury, or things are going to happen in the transfer portal, and you're going to have to go find someone who you maybe didn't project to be ready in a certain spot. So that leads into a discussion.
Well, Mitch, if I could add one thing to that, if you don't, if you were left without a quarterback at some point in during your tenure as the coach, there's quick fixes all over the place. I mean, there's quarterbacks that jump into the portal all the time, and you can go get a guy as a Power 5 team who was borderline a Power 5 starter last year, would project to be a Power 5 starter. You could tell him you're going to be a Power 5 starter that year, Power 4, whatever we call it. You can go get that guy. The fixes are quick. So I agree with you. I mean, you have to approach it, with really, really gentle hands, and it's because it's serious business all the way through.
We did see that backfire for Nebraska last year with Jeff Sims, and just thinking that there's a quick fix out there and say, okay, let's go get this guy because he's been a Power 5 starter. But
yeah, might not be preferred, but it exists.
That doesn't happen every time. I mean, for every Bo Nix, there's a couple of Jeff Sims, or maybe 5 Jeff Sims experiences out there. But Nebraska came up on the short end of the portal. Good fortune last year, but I also think that there's a reason to just continue to push and progress and develop quarterbacks through the program. There's a reason to do it in the recruiting world, because you want to be able to appeal to the next guy. You want to be able to appeal to this year to the class of 2025 quarterback. And, that means not creating a logjam in front of that player. So when you're recruiting quarterbacks to come in and be early enrollees a year from now, freshmen in the program in 2025, it's good to be able to show them that you as a program, if you're Glenn Thomas, if you're Marcus Satterfield, Matt Rule, having these conversations that they're having this month, deeply into these conversations with recruits at all positions, but quarterback's just it just operates differently. You want to say, hey, look, we don't worry about red shirts. We envision everybody as someone who's going to come in here and have the opportunity to start, if not early in their career, before they get to the end of it. And Nebraska's got a guy on its board right now in this class of 2025. He was in for the red-white game a couple of weeks ago, TJ Lateef from Orange, California, and he appears to be at the top of the list for who Nebraska wants to build this group in 25 around. And he's now forecasted, if you pay attention to the recruiting forecasts, Steve Wiltfong from On3 gave him a Nebraska prediction, and the Huskers will be out there. The coaches will be out there in California, undoubtedly this month to try to seal that deal before you get into June and the camp season begins in full.
Yeah, and then there's a couple more in 2026 names that you might be familiar with. Why don't we take a break here, Mitch, and mention one of those guys when we come back and round things out here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. But a quick reminder that if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting, make the switch over to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels. That part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's pause here and talk about Monopoly Go, more about Monopoly Go. And you're saying, hey, you guys talked about that yesterday, and you talked about that on Friday and every day. And well, yeah, we did, but there's so much good stuff in Monopoly Go. We have to tell you more. You can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build each other's board. This is based on the classic board game Monopoly, but it's done on your phones. The more you play together, the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. You can get these unique stickers to trade, cool new playing pieces to travel the board with, have some hilarious emoji fun, taunting your friends by smashing their buildings and heist their vaults. I mean, this is just a lot of stuff going on here. Monopoly Go features constantly changing tournaments and challenges. Try the mini games like digging for treasure. And then there's always new events in addition to that to help you win big. Something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. Go do it. Get off the bench. Download it now. Free on Google Play and the App Store.
All right, final segment here on a Tuesday. We talked a little bit about Nebraska, their coaching staff's a little trip to Norris Middle School over the weekend. Now they have spread out. They have gone to the local high schools. I think I saw 10 coaches at Millard South yesterday. Visiting a couple of the top targets for 2025.
And in Wahoo, they went to see Chase Lofton, the tight end at Millard South, who's a 4-star prospect, uncommitted, and then they went and saw Connor Booth, the running back in Wahoo, who is a Nebraska commit. All the assistant coaches were there for that. Matt Rule can't go because of the rules and what they limit the head coach from doing in the spring. He'll be there to see these guys, these types of players in the winter after the season.
He was probably still in Kansas City coming off of that NASCAR race, I think.
Did he go to Kansas City for a race?
Yeah, he went to the Kansas Speedway race over the weekend. He took a couple pictures, and then it ended up being
keep track of everywhere that he goes
by a nose, but just like the Kentucky Derby, by a nose.
Surprised he wasn't at the Kentucky Derby.
I'm surprised too. He's everywhere, but he was not at our local high schools. The rest of the coaching staff was. I mean, these are big targets that are still out there on the board. As you've seen Nebraska's class come together for 2025. 2025.
Right.
There's still a bunch of local targets that are out there on the board. There's local guys that have already committed, but when you talk about Lofton and Ryman Ziebert, it's guys that we've mentioned before, and Pierce Mooberry, Tyson Terry's already in the class. There's some big time, meat left on that bone for the 2025 class, just locally for Nebraska. And then you could go far beyond the line too, and get onto 2026, the rising juniors as well.
Yeah, so there's four commits from in-state for the 2025 class, and then there's 4 prospects that Nebraska's offered who are uncommitted, and they saw Muberry, you mentioned at Millard North. That was the defensive coaches visited Millard North to see Caden Vermas, the DB who is committed to Nebraska. The defensive coaches went to Omaha North to see commit Tyson Terry, the big defensive lineman and star wrestler for the Vikings. And the offensive assistants went out to Platteview to see Ryman Ziebert, the tight end. So this took a lot of planning, a lot of coordination back in the office in Lincoln. I wonder how many cars they had to take, and how they split up. If maybe they split up after going to Millard South. Defensive guys said, "Hey, let's go down to North." Offensive guys went to Millard North. It's interesting to see the logistical challenges that exist when you've got your entire staff out in one city. But
I did not see any Ed Foley pictures from the car or anything like that yesterday.
Not enough time. I mean, he probably had to drive through somewhere and just get a quick quick burger or whatever. But I don't know. Possibly Runza. We'll have to ask Ed next time we see him where he's been hanging out, what he's been eating while he's at Omaha. He went with the defensive coaches. Interestingly, Ed, who the special teams coordinator, he went to Omaha North. I think it's because he likes to look angry at the camera in the photos that are tweeted out with his arms crossed, like almost a bone throwing stance. It's the offensive guys, they pose. It's too nice for Ed. He wants to have the mad face and look into the camera like he's about to tackle someone.
Classic football guy. Offense versus defense guys. Soon enough, the defense guys are going to be doing the crotch chop like Anthony Edwards has adopted into his game. Yeah, I think you got to bring the energy that way in the pictures.
So in addition to these 2025 players, we mentioned before the break, as we talked about quarterbacks and everything quarterback related, that you have to consider when you make decisions for the players in the program, what's down the chute, what might be coming next at quarterback if you're Nebraska and you're recruiting. And there's one of those guys at Millard South. Along with seeing Chase Lofton, Nebraska can get eyes on Jet Tomala, along with Marion Jackson and Isaac Jensen, who are pass catchers for Jet Tomala at Millard South and have big-time offers already as sophomores. Tomala's a sophomore, and he was out tearing up the Elite 11 combine in Las Vegas over the weekend, had the highest score, tied for the highest score among underclassmen in the accuracy challenge. So this is a kid who probably isn't getting the attention he deserves, I would say, as a rising star in the Metro Conference. And it helps him at Millard South for sure that he's got 3 targets to throw to who are going to be playing in Power 5 conferences. But we should be probably talking more or thinking more about Jet Tomala, who is a 2026 quarterback, and I think is going to be recruited on a level that is equal to or in excess of what we saw with Zane Flores in the 23 class and Danny Kaelin in the 24 class.
Yeah, it's a good note, and often we'll have to. And Millard South's got a lot of players, and they're definitely with their new head coach who's taken over in the last couple of years, Ty Wisdom. He's taken certainly more active, I think, approach to player recruitment and things like that. So they'll get some guys, that's for sure, and they'll get them recruited. And it helps when you have a bunch of weapons around you. I'm looking forward to seeing. I haven't seen Jet Tomala play yet. But I'm looking forward to it, obviously, as it becomes a junior this coming fall. And that's going to be a really, really good football team. So you do have to watch out for that type of stuff. And then there's Dayton Raiola, too, the little brother of Dylan Raiola, who's in the 2026 class. So there's just little stuff to think about all over the place when you frame up the quarterback room, whether it's this year or in the next 3 or 4.
Yeah, I saw Tomala in 22 as a freshman in the Millard South Gretna game at Buell Stadium, and he was JV quarterback, and Cam Kojal was the starter as a senior, but he was off playing with USA Baseball, now a mainstay in the Vanderbilt baseball lineup. And Tomala had to come in it was a rout, Millard South. This is Wisdom's first year, and to think how far they've come with all these great players. But Gretna was just running them off the field, and quarterbacks couldn't get going. So Tamala came in off the bench as a JV guy, and my ears perked up, my eyes perked up. If that's something that can happen, and sure. I thought, well, this guy can throw the ball. This guy's somebody to watch, and he's turned out to be even more than that. So keep an eye on him. And that all matters for Nebraska and what it does with even the quarterbacks in the program, because if you want to have a chance, as we've said several times in this podcast, with the guys down the road, it matters how you handle the players in the program. So Dayton Raiola will have a close-up seat to see how players in the program are handled as his brother works to earn the starting job. So that's all for today. Come back and see us on Wednesday. Until then, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV, free in the Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app.